In this video you're about to watch, you will step into the heart of a tragedy. A mother who only wanted freedom finds herself trapped, cornered, and forced to make the most devastating choice any parent could imagine. What drove Margaret Garner to turn against her own blood? What nightmare of slavery was so dark, she believed death was mercy? Stay to the end to feel the weight of her story, and kindly subscribe to our channel as we drop more historical stories you would love. Then drop a comment below so we can hear your thought on the story, because this is history that cannot be forgotten. Margaret Garner was born in Boone County, Kentucky. She entered life not as a free child, but as someone else's property. Her enslaver was Archibald Gaines, and like thousands of enslaved women, her days were consumed by hard labor, strict rules, and the constant threat of violence. The river was her constant reminder of freedom. Just across the water lay Ohio, a free state. But freedom was a cruel temptation. For many enslaved families, the Ohio River was a border between hope and despair, between life as property and the possibility of life as a person. Margaret got married to Robert Garner, another enslaved person. Together they had children, building a fragile family in the shadow of slavery. But every enslaved family knew one terrifying truth: children could be sold away at any moment. A mother could wake up one day and never see her child again. And so, when the chance came to escape, Margaret and Robert seized it. On the night of January 27, 1856, Margaret, Robert, their children, and several relatives made their move. It was one of the coldest winters of the decade. The river was frozen over, and the ice, dangerous as it was, offered a chance to cross without a boat. The group fled the plantation, hearts racing, breath freezing in the night air. Step by step, they crossed the Ohio River, carrying children in their arms, praying the ice wouldn't crack. Somewhere behind them, they knew pursuers were already preparing to give chase. But when Margaret's feet touched Ohio soil, she must have felt, even for a moment, that she had done the impossible. They had reached free territory. They found shelter in the home of a free black man in Cincinnati, hiding as they waited for help from the Underground Railroad. But freedom under the law was an illusion. Thanks to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, even in a free state, slave catchers had the legal right to seize them and drag them back to Kentucky. And that's exactly what happened. At dawn, the hunters arrived. U.S. Marshals, deputies, and Archibald Gaines himself stormed into the Cincinnati home where Margaret and her family hid. And here is where Margaret made her fateful choice. She knew what awaited her children if they were taken back. Beatings, auctions, years of forced labor, perhaps even sexual violence, which was a constant reality for enslaved women. Margaret decided she would not let her children live as slaves. When the men burst into the cabin, they didn't find a helpless woman. They found Margaret with a knife in her hand, her face set with grim resolve. Before they could stop her, Margaret killed her 2-year-old daughter, Mary. She tried to kill her other children as well, but the men overpowered her. When they pulled her away, she cried out that she would rather see all her children dead than return to bondage. Even the slave catchers, men accustomed to violence, were stunned. Newspapers later reported that they were shaken by the scene. Margaret's act had turned the cabin into a place of horror and a place of defiance. News spread quickly. Margaret and her family were arrested, and the case immediately drew national attention. Abolitionists argued that Margaret should be tried in Ohio for murder. That way, at least the law would acknowledge her child as a human being whose life had value. Slaveholders, however, demanded that the Garners be returned under the Fugitive Slave Act, treating Margaret not as a mother, but as stolen property. The courts sided with the slaveholders. Margaret and her family were sent back to Kentucky. But the story did not disappear. Newspapers across the North carried the haunting tale. Abolitionists seized on it as the ultimate proof of slavery's cruelty. How evil must a system be, they asked, if a mother believed death was better for her children than life in chains? After the case, Margaret and her family were moved south, away from the Ohio border to prevent another escape attempt. They ended up in Louisiana and Mississippi, deeper in the heart of slavery. Tragically, Margaret never saw freedom again. In 1858, just 2 years after the desperate night in Cincinnati, she died of typhoid fever during a riverboat accident. Witnesses claimed that as the boat went down, she begged that her children be drowned with her, once again choosing death over slavery. Her enslaver refused. The children survived, and they remained in bondage. Margaret Garner's story did not end with her death. She became a symbol, her name spoken in abolitionist speeches, printed in pamphlets, and whispered in sermons. For many, she embodied the truth that enslaved people were not passive victims but human beings who fought, resisted, and sometimes made choices too terrible for most to imagine. Today, when we speak of Margaret Garner, we are not only remembering a mother's tragic choice. We are confronting slavery itself, the brutality that could make death seem like mercy. Margaret Garner's story is not easy to hear. It's horrifying, it's heartbreaking, and it raises questions with no simple answers. Was she a murderer or a mother protecting her children from a fate worse than death? Was her act one of despair or of ultimate resistance? Let us know in the comments section and tell us where you are watching from. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting and intriguing stories. See you on the next one.